blood. That was the first thing Thomas McKenna saw in the snow. Dark crimson drops leading from the Wyoming Trail toward the abandoned way station, each one freezing as it hit the ground. His horse ranger snorted nervously, ears flicking toward sounds Thomas couldn't yet hear, labored breathing, muffled whimpering. Someone was dying out here. Thomas drew his rifle in one smooth motion, scanning the desolate landscape for threats. October storms in the territory could kill faster than bullets, but men with guns ran a close second. The blood trail was fresh, still liquid enough to steam in the bitter air. A woman's cry split the silence, raw, primal, desperate. Thomas spurred Ranger forward, following the crimson drops around the station's corner. What he found there hit him like a punch to the gut. A young woman crouched in the dirt, her torn dress soaked with blood and birthing water. Dark hair plastered to her skull with sweat, face contorted in agony. Pregnant? No, not pregnant anymore. The baby was coming now. Jesus, Thomas breathed, leaping from his saddle. She looked up at him with wild, terrified eyes, one hand pressed between her legs trying to slow the blood flow. "Help me," she gasped. "Please, the baby." Another contraction seized her, and she screamed, a sound that would haunt Thomas's dreams for years to come. This wasn't just labor. Something was wrong. Dangerously wrong. Before we jump back in, comment where you're tuning in from, and if this story has touched you, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "How long?" Thomas demanded, dropping to his knees beside her. "Hours," she sobbed. "Since dawn. Can't push anymore. So tired." The amount of blood in the snow around her told Thomas everything he needed to know. She was hemorrhaging. Without help, both mother and child would be dead within the hour. "What's your name?" he asked, stripping off his coat. "Sarah." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Sarah Whitmore." "Well, Sarah Whitmore, I'm Thomas McKenna, and I'm gonna save your life. But you got to fight with me. You understand." She nodded weakly, then her eyes rolled back as another massive contraction hit. Thomas could see the baby's head crowning, dark hair matted with blood and fluid. "This baby's coming whether we're ready or not," he said grimly. "On the next pain, you push with everything you got left." Everything. Sarah's eyes found his, and for a moment he saw not just fear but fierce determination. This woman was a fighter. She just needed someone to fight alongside her. "Now, Sarah. Push." Her scream echoed across the empty prairie as she bore down with desperate strength. The baby's head emerged fully, then shoulders, and suddenly Thomas was catching a tiny, slippery body in his hands. The infant was silent. Terrifyingly silent. "Is it?" Sarah's voice broke. Thomas cleared the baby's mouth and nose with urgent fingers, then rubbed the tiny chest vigorously. Nothing. No cry, no movement, no sign of life. "Come on," he muttered desperately. "Come on, little one." He breathed gently into the baby's mouth, his heart hammering. Sarah watched with eyes full of dying hope. Then a tiny cough. A weak cry. The baby's chest began rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. "She's alive," Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. "Sarah, your daughter's alive." But even as relief flooded through him, Thomas could see that their fight wasn't over. Sarah was still bleeding heavily, her face growing paler by the minute. The nearest doctor was 15 miles away, and the storm brewing on the horizon would make travel impossible within hours. If he was going to save them both, he had to act fast. "Sarah, listen to me," he said urgently, wrapping the baby in his shirt. "I need to get you to my ranch. It's closer than town, and I've got supplies there. But we need to move now." She tried to nod, but her strength was fading fast. Thomas made a split-second decision that would change all their lives forever. He gathered Sarah in his arms, the baby pressed between them, and lifted them both onto Ranger's back. As the first snowflakes began to fall, he rode like death itself was chasing them, because in a way, it was. "Stay with me, Sarah," he called over the wind. "Both of you stay with me." Sarah stared at his outstretched hand as if it might be a trap. "I can't pay you nothing. Got no money, no family, no." Didn't ask for payment. Thomas kept his hand steady, his voice calm. "Asked you to come with me." The wind picked up, sending dried leaves skittering across the ground and making Sarah shiver violently. She looked toward the horizon where the storm clouds had grown darker, then back at Thomas's weathered face. "Why?" The single word carried a lifetime of disappointment. "Because it's the right thing to do." After another moment's hesitation, she placed her small hand in his calloused one. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. Her skin was ice cold. But something else, something that made him want to gather her up and shield her from every harsh wind the world could blow. Getting her mounted behind him on Ranger took patience. Her pregnancy made movement awkward, and she was weaker than she'd first appeared. Thomas could feel the tremors running through her slight frame as she settled against his back, her arms wrapping tentatively around his waist. "How long since you ate?" he asked, guiding Ranger into an easy gait. The silence stretched so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, 2 days. Maybe 3. His jaw tightened. 2 days without food, pregnant and alone in October weather. It was a miracle she was still conscious. "Hold tight. My place ain't far." They rode in silence broken only by the wind and Ranger's steady hoofbeats. Thomas could feel Sarah's grip loosening as exhaustion claimed her, her head occasionally nodding against his shoulder. Each time she started to slip, he'd adjust his position to keep her secure. The first fat snowflakes began falling as his ranch came into view, a modest spread with a sturdy cabin, barn, and corral. Nothing fancy, but built to last through hard winters and harder times. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm light glowed in the windows. "Sarah," he said gently as they reached the porch. "We're here." She stirred, blinking in confusion as he dismounted and reached up to help her down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched the ground, and Thomas caught her against his chest, feeling how slight she was beneath her layers of worn clothing. "Easy now," he murmured, lifting her with careful strength. "Let's get you inside and warmed up." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, kitchen area, and a door leading to what she assumed was his bedroom. The warmth hit her like a physical embrace, and she couldn't suppress a small sob of relief. Thomas set her gently in the chair closest to the fire, then moved efficiently around the small kitchen. Within minutes, he had coffee brewing and was ladling soup from a pot that had been simmering on the stove. "Eat slow," he instructed, placing the bowl in her hands. "Your stomach ain't used to food right now." The soup was simple, vegetables and broth, but it tasted like heaven. Sarah tried to follow his advice, but hunger made her hands shake as she lifted the spoon. Thomas noticed and quietly moved a second chair closer, ready to help if needed. "The baby," she said suddenly, one hand moving to her belly. "It's been moving different today. Restless-like." Thomas nodded, though he knew little about such things. "Probably knows its mama needs taking care of. Babies are smart that way." As warmth returned to Sarah's body and food settled in her stomach, wariness crept back into her eyes. She studied Thomas's face in the firelight, the strong jaw, the gentle brown eyes, the patient way he waited for her to finish eating without hovering. "You don't know me," she said abruptly. "Don't know what I done, where I come from. Don't need to. What if I'm running from the law? What if I stole something Did you?" The direct question caught her off guard. "No, but..." "Then it don't matter." Sarah set down the empty bowl with trembling hands. "It matters. Everything matters when you're carrying a bastard child." The harsh word hung in the air between them. Thomas's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew softer. "That baby ain't responsible for how it came to be. And neither are you, I'm guessing." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "My family sure didn't see it that way. Threw me out the day they could see I was showing. Said I was a disgrace, a whore, that I'd brought shame on the family name." Her voice cracked. "My own papa looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his boot." Thomas felt anger kindle in his chest, not at her, but at people who could turn their backs on their own blood when she needed them most. "Their shame, not yours." Easy words. Sarah's voice turned bitter. "You don't know what it's like, walking into town heavy with child and no ring on your finger. The looks, the whispers. Women crossing the street to avoid you, men thinking you're fair game for any kind of treatment." "No," Thomas admitted. "I don't know that. But I know what it's like to be judged for things beyond your control." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. There was pain there, old and deep, carefully hidden but not quite gone. "The father," Thomas said quietly. "He coming back?" Sarah's laugh was harsh and broken. "The father's got himself a respectable wife now. Told everyone I was lying when I tried to tell the truth. Said a woman like me would claim any man as father to save her reputation. What kind of man was he? The kind that takes what he wants and damn the consequences." Sarah's hand moved protectively over her belly. "But this baby's mine now. Just mine. And I'll die before I let anyone hurt it the way I've been hurt." The fierce protectiveness in her voice stirred something in Thomas's chest. Despite everything she'd endured, she was thinking of her child's welfare over her own comfort. "You don't have to die for anything," he said. "Not while you're under my roof." Sarah stared at him, searching his face for deception or ulterior motive. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" "Nothing you ain't willing to give." Men always want something. Some men do. I ain't some men. The simple statement carried such quiet conviction that Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. But fear had become her constant companion these past months, and trust didn't come easy anymore. I can't stay long, she said. Soon as the baby comes and I'm able to travel, I'll move on. Find work somewhere, somehow. Thomas nodded, though privately he wondered where a woman alone with a newborn could find work that would keep them both fed and sheltered. You'll stay as long as you need to. No strings, no expectations. And when people start talking, because they will, an unmarried woman living in a bachelor's house. Let them talk. His calm acceptance of potential scandal surprised her. Most men she'd known cared deeply about their reputations, especially in small communities where gossip traveled faster than wildfire. You don't understand, Sarah pressed. I'll ruin your standing in the community. Decent women won't speak to you. Business might suffer. Sarah. Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. I've been alone on this ranch for 5 years. If I cared that much about what people thought, I'd have married the banker's daughter when she made it clear she was interested. I choose to live by my own code, not theirs. Despite herself, Sarah felt a small warmth unfurl in her chest. When was the last time someone had put her welfare above their own concerns? I don't understand you, she whispered. Don't need to understand. Just need to rest and let yourself heal. The storm that had been threatening all day arrived with full fury that night. Wind howled around the cabin like a living thing, rattling windows and sending snow swirling in white curtains past the glass. Sarah lay on Thomas's bed, he'd insisted, taking the floor near the fireplace, listening to the tempest and feeling strangely safe for the first time in months. She woke to the smell of bacon frying and coffee brewing. Gray morning light filtered through frost-covered windows, and the storm had gentled to steady snowfall. Thomas moved quietly around the kitchen, trying not to wake her. Morning, she said softly, struggling to sit up. Her back ached, and the baby was pressing uncomfortably against her ribs. Morning. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in weeks. The admission surprised them both. Thank you. For the bed, I mean. Floor's fine for me. You need proper rest. Sarah watched him work, noting the easy efficiency of his movements, the way he seemed to anticipate what needed doing next. There was something deeply calming about his presence. No wasted motion, no impatience, just steady competence. Can I help? She asked. You can sit and eat when it's ready. I'm not an invalid. Thomas glanced at her, taking in the way she held her back, the exhaustion still shadowing her eyes. No, but you're carrying precious cargo. Let me do the heavy lifting for now. The phrase precious cargo made her throat tighten unexpectedly. No one had spoken of her pregnancy as anything other than shameful or burdensome. After breakfast, Thomas began his daily chores while Sarah sat by the window watching snow blanket the ranch. The view was beautiful in its stark simplicity, rolling hills disappearing into white silence, the barn and corral creating familiar shapes in the landscape. She found herself studying Thomas as he moved between buildings, noting how he spoke gently to his horses, how he took extra care to ensure their comfort in the cold. There was something inherently trustworthy about a man who treated animals with kindness. When he returned for the midday meal, she had questions ready. How long have you lived here? 5 years. Built most of it myself. No family. Something flickered across his features. Not anymore. The careful way he said it told her there was pain behind those words, but she didn't press. They both had histories they weren't ready to share. What happened to them? She asked anyway, unable to help herself. Thomas was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, cholera. Took my wife and daughter when we were living in Kansas. This ranch, it was supposed to be a fresh start for all of us. The simple words carried such weight of grief that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. But she could see it wasn't. Not really. The careful way he'd made up the bed for her, the gentleness in his hands when he'd helped her, these were the actions of a man who'd loved deeply and lost everything. How old was she? Your daughter. 3. Rebecca. She had her mama's green eyes and a laugh that could make you forget every trouble you ever had. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her belly. 3 years old, old enough to have a personality, to fill a house with chatter and joy. The loss must have been devastating. Is that why you helped me? Because of them. Thomas considered the question seriously. Maybe partly, but mostly because it was right. That afternoon, as snow continued to fall, Sarah insisted on helping with small tasks, mending a torn shirt, organizing supplies, anything to feel useful. Thomas worked on repairing a bridle at the kitchen table, and they fell into comfortable companionship. What's it like? Thomas asked suddenly. What? Carrying a child. The feeling of it. Sarah paused, needle halfway through fabric. Most people avoided mentioning her pregnancy directly, as if ignoring it might make the scandal disappear. Different than I expected, she said slowly. Harder on the body, but there's moments when the baby moves, and it feels like a secret conversation. Like we're getting to know each other before we meet. Thomas nodded, his hands stilling on the leather. Martha used to say that. Said she could tell Rebecca's moods before she was born. What was she like? Your wife. A soft smile crossed Thomas's features. Strong. Stronger than me in most ways. She could birth a calf, bake bread, and settle a dispute between neighbors all in the same morning. But gentle too. She saw good in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. She sounds wonderful. She was. You remind me of her some. The comparison startled Sarah. I'm not strong. If I was strong, I wouldn't be in this situation. Strength ain't about avoiding hard situations. It's about how you handle them when they come. You could have given up by now. Instead, you're fighting for your baby's future. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a small, warm recognition that maybe she was stronger than she believed. 3 days into Sarah's stay, the sound of approaching horses broke the peaceful morning routine. Thomas tensed immediately, moving to the window to peer through the frost-covered glass. Expecting company? Sarah asked, though the set of his shoulders already told her the answer. No. Thomas reached for his rifle. Stay inside. Through the window, Sarah watched 3 riders approach the cabin. Even from a distance, she could see they weren't here for a social call. Their postures were aggressive, purposeful. As they drew closer, her blood ran cold. The lead rider was Sheriff Wallace from Cedar Falls, a man she remembered from her family's rare trips to town. Behind him rode 2 men she didn't recognize, but their badges marked them as deputies. Sarah Whitmore, Sheriff Wallace called out as Thomas stepped onto the porch. We know she's in there, McKenna. Send her out. She's under my protection, Thomas replied calmly, but Sarah could see the tension in his stance. Protection from what? From answering for her crimes? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Crimes? What crimes? What's she accused of? Thomas asked. Theft. The Hartwell family says she stole money and jewelry before she ran off. Substantial amount too, enough to make it a hanging offense. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Hartwells, the family she'd worked for before her pregnancy became obvious, the family who dismissed her the moment they realized her condition. That's a lie, she called out, moving to the door despite Thomas's earlier instruction to stay inside. Sarah, don't, Thomas started. But she was already stepping onto the porch, her chin raised despite the fear coursing through her veins. I never stole nothing from the Hartwells or anyone else. Sheriff Wallace's eyes moved over her obvious pregnancy with distaste. Mrs. Hartwell says different. Says money went missing the same day you left their employment. Jewelry too, her grandmother's ring and necklace. She's lying. Why would a respectable woman lie about something like that? The question hung in the cold air. They all knew why, because accusing the pregnant hired girl of theft was easier than admitting they'd turned her out without cause or compassion. Maybe because she needs a reason that makes her look good for throwing out a pregnant woman, Thomas said quietly. You calling Mrs. Hartwell a liar, McKenna? I'm saying Sarah's been here 3 days, and I've seen nothing but honesty from her. 3 days of knowing someone don't make you an expert on their character. Don't take long to recognize quality. The sheriff's expression hardened. She needs to come with us. Face the charges proper-like. In her condition? Thomas gestured towards Sarah's obviously advanced pregnancy. She's in no shape to travel, let alone sit in a jail cell. Should have thought of that before she started stealing. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. If they took her now, she'd give birth in jail if the stress and conditions didn't kill the baby first. And afterward? If convicted, she could hang, leaving her child an orphan from birth. I want to see the warrant, Thomas said. Sheriff Wallace reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. Thomas studied it carefully, though Sarah could see from his expression that it was legitimate. This says theft of property valued at over $50, Thomas read aloud. What exactly is supposed to be missing? $47 in cash and Mrs. Hartwell's emerald jewelry set. Worth at least $30 by itself. Sarah's mind raced. The emerald set, she remembered it well. Mrs. Hartwell had worn it to church every Sunday, making sure everyone noticed how fine it was. But Sarah had never even touched it, let alone stolen it. Where would I hide something like that? Sarah asked desperately. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back. Search me, search my things, you won't find nothing because there's nothing to find. Maybe you already sold it. Or hid it somewhere to come back for later? Then where's the money I supposedly got for selling it? You found me half-starved and frozen by that old way station. If I'd had money, you think I'd have been in that condition? The logic was sound, and Sarah could see doubt creeping into the deputies' faces. But Sheriff Wallace remained unmoved. That's for a judge and jury to decide. Not me. She ain't going anywhere, Thomas said quietly. The words were spoken without heat, but there was steel underneath that made all three lawmen tense. You interfering with official business, McKenna? I'm protecting an innocent woman who's in no condition to travel. You don't know she's innocent. I know her. That's enough. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. In 3 days, this quiet cowboy had developed more faith in her than her own family had shown in 22 years of life. Stand aside, McKenna. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Thomas didn't move. She stays here until after the baby comes. You want to arrest her then? We'll discuss it. But she ain't leaving this ranch today. The tension stretched tight as a wire. Sarah could see the deputies' hands drifting toward their weapons, could feel violence building in the cold air. Please, she said, stepping forward. Don't fight on my account. I'll go with them. No. Thomas's voice was firm. You won't. Thomas. You won't, he repeated, his eyes never leaving the sheriff's face. Because you're my wife now, and I protect what's mine. The silence that followed Thomas's declaration stretched like a held breath. Sarah stared at him in shock, while the three lawmen exchanged uncertain glances. Your wife. Sheriff Wallace's voice carried disbelief. That's right. Since when? Since now. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You can't just declare someone your wife, McKenna. There's legal processes, ceremonies. Common law marriage is recognized in this territory. We've been living as man and wife, and I'm claiming her as such before witnesses. Thomas's voice remained calm, but Sarah could see the determination in the set of his jaw. That makes any charges against her a matter for civil court, not criminal. And since she's carrying my child, any attempt to jail her before birth could be seen as endangering both mother and baby. Sarah's heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. His child? The lie was breathtaking in its audacity and its potential consequences for Thomas. That baby ain't yours, McKenna, one of the deputies said with a sneer. Everyone knows she was working for the Hartwells up until a few months ago. Everyone knows a lot of things that ain't true, Thomas replied. Fact is, she's my wife now, carrying my child, and I won't see her dragged away from her home. Sheriff Wallace studied them both, clearly calculating his options. A common law marriage claim would complicate things legally, especially with Sarah so obviously pregnant. And Thomas McKenna had a reputation as an honest man. His word carried weight in the community. This is convenient timing, McKenna. Life's full of timing, Sheriff. Good and bad. You willing to swear to this in court? Put your reputation on the line for her. Thomas moved closer to Sarah, his hand coming to rest gently on her shoulder. The touch was warm, reassuring, and completely unexpected. I'm willing to swear that Sarah McKenna is my wife and under my protection. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. The formal way he spoke her new name, Sarah McKenna, sent an odd flutter through her chest. It had been so long since anyone had spoken of her with respect, without judgment or condemnation. Well, Sheriff Wallace said after a long moment, this changes things some. Can't arrest a man's pregnant wife without stronger evidence than we got. Evidence you don't have because she didn't do what she's accused of, Thomas said. Maybe, maybe not. But for now, she stays here. The sheriff's gaze hardened. But don't think this is over, McKenna. If that baby comes, and it don't look nothing like you, people are going to have questions. People always have questions. Don't mean I have to answer them. After the lawmen rode away, Sarah and Thomas stood on the porch watching until they disappeared over the horizon. The silence between them felt charged with unspoken words and sudden complications. Why? Sarah asked finally. Because it was the right thing to do. You just claimed my child as yours. Told the sheriff we're married. That's not something you can take back easily. Thomas turned to look at her, his brown eyes serious. I know. People will expect us to act married. Live as husband and wife. And when the baby comes. She trailed off, overwhelmed by the implications. When the baby comes, it'll have a name and a father who'll protect it. That's more than it had an hour ago. Sarah felt tears threaten again. You don't know what you've done. The talk, the complications. I know exactly what I've done. Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. I've given you and your child the protection of my name and my home. Everything else, we'll figure out as we go. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, the weight of their new reality settled between them. Sarah kept stealing glances at Thomas, trying to understand what manner of man would make such a sacrifice for a woman he'd known less than a week. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Thomas looked up from the bridle he was mending. "Do you?" "I asked first." "No regrets." "You?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Marriage to Thomas, even a marriage of convenience and protection, meant safety for her child. It meant a name, a home, a future that didn't involve constant fear and struggle. "No regrets," she said. "But I want you to know, I don't expect. That is, I won't assume that because you claim me as wife that you want a real marriage." Heat crept up her neck as she struggled with the words. Thomas set down his work and looked at her directly. "Sarah, I meant what I said about protecting you. That protection don't come with conditions or expectations. You'll share my name and my home, but nothing else unless you choose it freely." The quiet certainty in his voice eased something tight in her chest. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a choice. It's been a long time since anyone did that." They fell back into comfortable silence, but something had shifted between them. The formal distance of guest and host had been replaced by something more complex. Not quite the intimacy of true marriage, but not the casualness of mere friendship either. "Thomas," Sarah said as the fire burned low. "Yes." "What happens when people realize the baby don't look like you?" "Babies look like themselves mostly. Could favor its mama, could favor its daddy. People see what they expect to see, especially if we don't give them reason to look too close." "And if they do look close?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll deal with that when it comes." "But Sarah, that baby's mine now, far as the law and this community are concerned. I don't make promises I don't intend to keep." As Sarah settled into bed that night, Thomas had quietly moved his belongings to the main room. Giving her privacy, she placed her hands on her belly and felt the baby shift restlessly inside her. "You hear that, little one?" she whispered. "You got yourself a daddy who'll stand between you and the whole world if need be. That's more than most babies get, blood or no blood." For the first time since she'd discovered her pregnancy, Sarah felt something that might have been hope. 2 weeks into their unconventional marriage, Sarah woke to Thomas moving around the cabin in pre-dawn darkness. She listened to his quiet preparations, the familiar sounds that had become comforting routine. But this morning felt different somehow, charged with intention she couldn't name. "Thomas," she called softly. "Didn't mean to wake you. Go back to sleep." But something in his voice made her sit up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just got to ride into town for supplies." Sarah struggled to her feet, her pregnancy making every movement awkward now. She was so close to her time that Thomas had been reluctant to leave her alone even for short periods. "I could come with you." "No." The sharpness of his refusal surprised them both. "I mean, better you stay here and rest. Won't be gone long." Through the window, Sarah could see more riders approaching in the distance. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead horse, Sheriff Wallace again, and this time he had more men with him. "They're coming back," she said. Thomas's jaw tightened as he saw the approaching group. "Stay inside." But this time Sarah didn't obey. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and followed him onto the porch, needing to know what new threat was bearing down on them. Sheriff Wallace dismounted along with 4 other men, the 2 deputies from before, plus Jeremiah Hartwell and another man Sarah didn't recognize, but whose expensive clothes marked him as someone of importance. "Morning, McKenna," the sheriff said, his tone formal. "This here's Judge Morrison from the Territorial Court." The judge was a thin man with gray whiskers and cold eyes that moved over Sarah with obvious disapproval. "So this is the thief." "Alleged thief," Thomas corrected quietly. "Yes, well, we'll see about that." Judge Morrison gestured to Jeremiah Hartwell. "Mr. Hartwell has brought new evidence to light." Jeremiah Hartwell was a soft-bodied man who'd grown prosperous on his father's business connections. He'd always looked at Sarah with calculating eyes when she'd worked in his household, but she'd managed to avoid being alone with him. "Found this in the hired girl's room after she left," Hartwell said, producing a small cloth bag. He opened it to reveal several pieces of jewelry, not the emerald set he'd originally claimed was stolen, but other pieces Sarah recognized from Mrs. Hartwell's collection. "That's not mine," Sarah said immediately. "I never took those." "Found hidden under your mattress," Hartwell insisted. Mother checked her jewelry after the money went missing and found these pieces gone too. Then why didn't you mention them when you first made the accusation? Thomas asked. We were distraught. Took time to inventory everything properly. The explanation sounded rehearsed, and Sarah could see doubt in the judge's eyes. But doubt wasn't the same as dismissal. Even if these were planted, Judge Morrison said, there's still the matter of the missing money in the original jewelry set. I never took any money or jewelry, Sarah repeated, her voice stronger now despite her fear. I left the Hartwell house with exactly what I brought to it, nothing. Then how do you explain this? Hartwell pulled out a second item, a piece of paper that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a receipt from the general store in town, dated the day after she'd left the Hartwell house. A receipt for food and supplies paid for with cash, more cash than a hired girl would ever have legitimately. I never bought those things, Sarah said, but even she could hear how weak the denial sounded. Clerk remembers you, Sheriff Wallace said. Says you seemed nervous, kept looking over your shoulder like you were afraid of being caught. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. Someone had clearly planned this carefully, planting evidence in her former room, forging receipts, even bribing store clerks to lie. But who? And why? This is all lies, Thomas said, his voice hard with anger. Someone's gone to a lot of trouble to frame an innocent woman. Or, Judge Morrison said dryly, she's guilty as charged and you've been taken in by a pretty face and a sob story. I know my wife's character. A wife you married awfully conveniently after the accusations were made, Hartwell interrupted. Some might say that marriage was designed to complicate legal proceedings. The accusation hung in the air like a poison cloud. Sarah could see the calculation in the judge's eyes, the way he was weighing the evidence against Thomas's reputation. I think, Judge Morrison said slowly, that Mrs. McKenna needs to come with us while we sort this out properly. She's too close to her time, Thomas protested. Taking her now could kill both her and the baby. Should have thought of that before she started stealing. She didn't steal anything. Then she won't have any trouble proving her innocence. Sarah felt Thomas tense beside her, saw his hand drift toward his gun. The situation was about to turn violent, and that would only make things worse for everyone. I'll go, she said quietly. No. Thomas's voice was flat, final. Thomas, if I run now, they'll never stop hunting me. And they'll come after you too for harboring a fugitive. Let them come. The simple statement, spoken without bravado or heat, made her heart clench. He was prepared to stand against the law itself for her. I won't let you throw your life away for me, Sarah said. You've already done more than anyone could ask. I haven't done enough if you're still scared. Judge Morrison cleared his throat impatiently. Touching as this is, I have a schedule to keep. Mrs. McKenna, you're coming with us. Mr. McKenna, if you interfere, you'll be charged with obstruction. Sarah looked at Thomas, memorizing his face. In 2 weeks, he'd given her more kindness and protection than she'd known in her entire life. She wouldn't repay that by getting him killed or arrested. I'll come quietly, Sarah said, stepping forward. But Thomas moved to block her path. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, Sheriff Wallace said, his hand moving to his gun. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Sarah could feel the baby moving restlessly inside her, as if sensing the danger. She had to end this before someone got killed. Wait, she said, an idea forming. Mr. Hartwell, you said you found those things in my room after I left? That's right. Which room was that? Hartwell's eyes narrowed slightly. The little room off the kitchen. The one with the window facing the barn? Yes. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Funny thing about that room, Mr. Hartwell, it didn't have a mattress. I slept on a pallet on the floor, a pallet I took with me when I left because it was mine. She looked directly at Judge Morrison. Kind of hard to hide jewelry under a mattress that wasn't there. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Hartwell's face. You must be mistaken about. And that receipt, Sarah continued, her confidence growing. I can't read, Mr. Hartwell. Never learned how. So how exactly did I know what to ask for at the store without being able to read a shopping list? The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Morrison's sharp eyes moved between Sarah and Hartwell, clearly reassessing the situation. Anyone can lie about reading, Hartwell said, but his voice lacked conviction. Test me then, Sarah challenged. Give me that receipt to read out loud. Hartwell's face had gone pale. This is ridiculous. Yes, Judge Morrison said quietly. It is. The revelation hung in the cold morning air like smoke from a gun. Judge Morrison's expression had shifted from stern judgment to growing suspicion, and Sarah could see Hartwell beginning to sweat despite the October chill. Mr. Hartwell, the judge said slowly, perhaps you'd like to explain how Mrs. McKenna supposedly hid jewelry under a mattress that didn't exist? There must have been some confusion about which room, and how she purchased supplies with a written list when she can't read. Thomas stepped closer to Sarah, his presence solid and reassuring. Seems like someone went to a lot of trouble to frame my wife. Makes a man wonder why. Hartwell's eyes darted between the faces watching him, all of them now clearly skeptical. This is all just confusion. Mistakes in memory. Awful convenient mistakes, Sheriff Wallace said, his own tone cooling toward the man who'd brought the charges. Sarah felt the baby give a particularly strong kick, as if celebrating this small victory. But she knew they weren't safe yet. Powerful men like Hartwell didn't give up easily when cornered. Even if there are discrepancies in the evidence, Hartwell said, rallying, there's still the matter of the missing money. $47 disappeared the same day she left our employ. Money that could have been taken by anyone with access to your house, Thomas pointed out, including family members. The suggestion hit its mark. Hartwell flinched, and Sarah remembered rumors she'd heard in town about Jeremiah's gambling debts, his mother's complaints about his spending. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything, Thomas said calmly. Just pointing out that accusing the hired help is easier than looking at uncomfortable possibilities closer to home. Judge Morrison studied the group before him with calculating eyes. Sarah could see him weighing reputations, influence, and the growing holes in the case against her. Sheriff Wallace, the judge said finally, I think we need to examine this evidence more carefully before proceeding, and perhaps have a longer conversation with Mr. Hartwell about the timeline of these supposed thefts. Your Honor, Hartwell protested, you can't seriously believe the word of a woman of her character over. Over what, Mr. Hartwell? A member of a respected family? Thomas's voice carried a warning that made Hartwell step back. Because Sarah McKenna is my wife, which makes her family now, and I protect my family. The quiet intensity in Thomas's voice sent a shiver through Sarah that had nothing to do with the cold. The way he said my family made it sound like an unbreakable vow. This isn't over, Hartwell said, but his bluster sounded hollow now. No, Judge Morrison agreed. It isn't. But it's over for today. Sheriff, escort Mr. Hartwell back to town. I want to examine this evidence more thoroughly, and I want to speak with Mrs. Hartwell about what exactly went missing and when. As the group prepared to leave, Sheriff Wallace approached Thomas and Sarah. This bought you time, McKenna, but it ain't finished. Be careful. Always am, Sheriff. And keep an eye on your wife. If someone's willing to frame her for theft, they might try other things. The warning sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the weather. Someone wanted her discredited, maybe even hanged. The question was who and why. After the riders disappeared over the horizon, Thomas and Sarah stood on the porch in heavy silence. The confrontation had drained her, and she found herself trembling with more than cold. Come inside, Thomas said gently, noticing her shaking. You need to sit down. But Sarah didn't move. Thomas, what you did out there, claiming me as family, standing against all of them. You could have lost everything. Didn't lose anything that mattered. Your reputation, your standing in the community. Don't matter if they're built on letting innocent people suffer. Sarah turned to look at him fully, this quiet man who'd turned his life upside down for a woman he barely knew. Why? Really why? It can't just be because it's the right thing to do. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the riders had vanished. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with old pain. When Martha and Rebecca died, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd never care about anything again. He looked at her then, his brown eyes intense. But watching someone try to destroy you and your baby, it reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for. I'm not her, Thomas. I'm not your Martha. No, he agreed. You're not. You're Sarah. And you're worth fighting for in your own right. The simple statement, spoken without pretty words or flowery declarations, hit her harder than any poetry could have. This man saw her, not as a replacement for what he'd lost, not as a charity case, but as herself. Worth protecting, worth defending, worth caring about. The baby's not yours, she said quietly. Doesn't matter whose blood runs in its veins. It's mine now, same as you are. The possessive warmth in his voice made her breath catch. She'd never belonged to anyone in a good way, only as property, as burden, as shame. But the way Thomas said mine made it sound like protection, like cherishing. What if I want to be yours? The words slipped out before she could stop them, brave and terrified at the same time. Really yours, not just for protection or convenience? Thomas went very still. Sarah, I know it's complicated. I know I'm pregnant with another man's child, and there's all this legal trouble and people will always talk. But Thomas, you've shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than I've known my whole life. And I think I'm falling in love with you. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Sarah's heart hammered as she waited for his response, terrified she'd just ruined the best thing that had ever happened to her. You sure? Thomas asked quietly. Because once you make that choice, there's no going back. You'd be mine completely, and I'd be yours the same way. No half measures, no pretending. I'm sure. Thomas stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then you're mine, he said simply. And I'm yours. Whatever comes, we face it together. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sure, a claiming that felt like coming home. Sarah melted into his arms, feeling truly safe for the first time in her life. 3 days after Judge Morrison's visit, Sarah woke before dawn to sharp pains cutting across her belly. She lay still for a moment, hoping they would pass, but the next contraction was stronger and definitely unmistakable. The baby was coming. Thomas, she called softly, not wanting to alarm him, but knowing she needed help. He was instantly alert, moving from his bedroll by the fire to her side. What is it? The baby. It's starting. Thomas's face went carefully calm, but she could see the worry in his eyes. How far apart are the pains? Close. Maybe 5 minutes. He nodded, already moving with purpose. I'll get water heating and gather the supplies we talked about. You stay put until I get back. But as Thomas stepped outside to fetch water from the well, Sarah heard the sound that had haunted her nightmares, approaching horses. Through the window, she could see riders coming hard and fast through the gray pre-dawn light. Jeremiah Hartwell rode in the lead, but this time he hadn't brought the sheriff. Instead, he was accompanied by 4 rough-looking men who wore their guns like they knew how to use them. Sarah struggled to her feet as another contraction hit, stronger than before. She had to warn Thomas, had to. The cabin door burst open before she could move. Hartwell stepped inside, his face twisted with rage and desperation. Finally, he said, his eyes moving over her obvious labor with satisfaction. Perfect timing. Get out, Sarah gasped. One hand braced against the wall as pain racked her body. I don't think so. You see, you've caused me considerable trouble, girl. Judge Morrison's been asking uncomfortable questions, digging into things that should stay buried. My mother's getting suspicious about missing money, and it's all because you couldn't just disappear quietly. Through the window, Sarah could see Thomas at the well, unaware of the danger. One of Hartwell's men was moving to flank him. What do you want? Sarah asked, trying to buy time. Simple. You're going to confess to the thefts. Write it all out nice and clear. Admit you stole the money and jewelry, and then you're going to disappear permanently. And if I don't? Hartwell's smile was cold. Then your husband dies, and you give birth in the wilderness alone. Either way, you won't be around to cause me any more problems. Another contraction hit, so strong it drove Sarah to her knees. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. You're in labor, Hartwell observed with clinical detachment. Even better. No one will question a woman dying in childbirth, especially one with your reputation. You're insane. I'm practical. I've got debts that need paying, and my mother's jewelry money was the perfect solution until you complicated things. So it had been him all along, stealing from his own mother and framing Sarah when suspicion arose. The depths of his selfishness shouldn't have surprised her, but they did. Outside, she heard the sound of struggle. Thomas had spotted the man flanking him. Shouts erupted, followed by the crack of gunfire. Thomas! Sarah cried out, trying to get to the window. He's fine for now, Hartwell said, catching her arm. Whether he stays that way depends on you. But even as he spoke, the cabin door exploded inward again. Thomas stood in the doorway, rifle in hand, his eyes taking in the scene with deadly calm. Blood streaked his left arm, but he was very much alive. Let her go, Hartwell. I don't think so, McKenna. See, you've become inconvenient too. Hartwell pulled a gun from his coat, pressing it against Sarah's temple. Drop the rifle. Sarah felt another contraction building and tried to breathe through it. The baby was coming fast now, and she was trapped between a madman and the man she loved. Sarah's in labor, Thomas said, his voice steady despite the fury in his eyes. Whatever quarrel you have with me, don't take it out on her and the baby. The baby's the perfect solution. No one questions a woman dying in childbirth, And without her testimony, there's no case against me. There's already a case against you. Judge Morrison found the real jewelry in your room yesterday. Your mother finally told the truth about what was missing and when. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Hartwell's features. You're lying. Sheriff's probably at your house right now with a warrant. You're finished, Hartwell. Let Sarah go, and maybe you can ride away clean. The gun at Sarah's temple wavered slightly. She could feel Hartwell's indecision, his growing desperation. You ruined everything, he snarled at her. If you just stayed gone, kept quiet. If you hadn't been stealing from your own mother, Sarah gasped between contractions, none of this would have happened. The truth of it seemed to snap something in Hartwell's mind. His face contorted with rage, and Sarah saw his finger tighten on the trigger. She threw herself sideways just as the gun fired, the bullet splintering would where her head had been. The movement sent her tumbling to the floor as another massive contraction hit. Thomas's rifle boomed in response. Hartwell spun and fell, clutching his shoulder and screaming curses. The others? Sarah managed to ask. Taken care of, Thomas said grimly, dropping his rifle and moving to her side. Sheriff Wallace followed them here. Seems Judge Morrison sent him to arrest Hartwell this morning. As if summoned by his name, Sheriff Wallace appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with weary professionalism. Everyone alive in here? Mostly, Thomas said, helping Sarah sit up against the wall. But the baby's coming now. Sarah felt pressure building inside her, different from the contractions. Thomas, I can't wait. The baby. I know, darling. I'm here. The endearment, spoken so naturally in the midst of crisis, gave her strength. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The next hour passed in a blur of pain, effort, and Thomas's steady voice guiding her through each contraction. Sheriff Wallace had taken the wounded Hartwell and his men away, but not before confirming that all charges against Sarah had been dropped. Judge Morrison had indeed found the real evidence of Hartwell's thefts, and his mother had finally admitted the truth about her son's gambling debts and desperate measures. Push now, Sarah, Thomas said, his hands steady and sure despite having no real experience with birthing. I can see the head. Sarah bore down with everything she had, Thomas's voice the only anchor in a world of overwhelming sensation. One more push, and suddenly the pressure released in a rush of warmth and relief. The baby's cry filled the cabin, strong, healthy, and absolutely beautiful. It's a girl, Thomas said, his voice full of wonder as he carefully lifted the tiny, squirming form. Sarah, she's perfect. Through exhausted tears, Sarah watched this gentle man tend to her daughter with the same careful competence he brought to everything else. He cleaned her gently, wrapped her in soft cloth, and then placed her in Sarah's waiting arms. Hello, little one, Sarah whispered, studying the tiny face. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at her with dark, alert eyes. I'm your mama. And I'm your daddy, Thomas added softly, one finger stroking the baby's soft cheek. Been waiting to meet you. Sarah looked up at him, this man who'd claimed a child not his own with such natural love. She needs a name. What were you thinking? Hope, Sarah said without hesitation. Her name is Hope McKenna. Thomas's smile was radiant. Hope McKenna. I like that. As Sarah nursed the baby for the first time, Thomas cleaned up and prepared food. The domestic scene felt surreal after the morning's violence, but also perfectly right. This was their family now, forged not by blood but by choice, protected by love and commitment rather than law or convention. Thomas, Sarah said as he brought her water and soup. What happens now? Now we live, he said simply. You heal, hope grows, and we build the life we want together. People will still talk. They'll count back the months, realize she's not yours by blood. Thomas settled beside them on the bed, his arm coming around Sarah's shoulders. Let them count. Hope's mine because I choose her to be, same as you're mine because we choose each other. Blood's just biology. Family's choice. Sarah leaned into his warmth, the baby content in her arms. I love you, Thomas McKenna. I love you too, Sarah McKenna. Both of you. 3 months later, on a crisp January morning, the McKenna family sat around their kitchen table sharing breakfast. Hope gurgled happily in her cradle nearby, growing plumper and more alert each day. Outside, snow covered the ranch in pristine white, but inside the cabin was warm with love and laughter. Mrs. Patterson from town stopped by yesterday while you were checking the horses, Sarah told Thomas as she refilled his coffee. Brought a gift for Hope, a little dress she embroidered herself. That was kind of her. She also mentioned that Jeremiah Hartwell got 5 years in territorial prison. His mother's moving back east to live with her sister. Thomas nodded. The trial had been swift once the real evidence came to light. Hartwell's desperate attempt to frame Sarah had only made his own crimes more obvious. "Good riddance," Sarah said firmly. "Though I almost feel sorry for Mrs. Hartwell. Finding out your son's a thief and would-be murderer can't be easy. No parent should have to face that." Sarah looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. "Our daughter will never have to worry about that. She's got a good father who'll teach her right from wrong. She's got a good mother, too. One who'll teach her to be strong and kind." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep. Hope had grown from a tiny, fragile infant into a robust baby with Thomas's gentle disposition and Sarah's stubborn streak. She had dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with curious intelligence. "Remember when you found me at that way station?" Sarah asked. "I thought my life was over. I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I'd ever seen. Pregnant, alone, scared, but still fighting for your baby. I wasn't brave. I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Sarah. It's doing what's right despite the fear." Sarah reached across the table to take his hand. "You saved us, you know. Both of us. We saved each other." Hope stirred in her cradle, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up hungry. Sarah rose to pick her up, marveling as she did every day at the miracle of this perfect little person they'd been blessed with. "Good morning, sweetheart," she murmured, settling back at the table to nurse. "Ready to start another day?" Thomas watched them with the same sense of wonder that filled him every morning. A year ago, he'd been a lonely widower going through the motions of living. Now he had a wife who challenged and delighted him, a daughter who brought joy to every moment, and a future bright with possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "Just this. Us. How sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." "You mean like finding your family by the side of a road?" "I mean like two broken people finding a way to heal each other." Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "We did heal each other, didn't we? Still are, every day." Hope finished nursing and looked up at Thomas with bright, alert eyes. He reached for her, and she came to him willingly, settling against his chest with the complete trust that never failed to humble him. "Hello, little girl," he murmured, kissing the top of her downy head. "What do you think? Should we take your mama into town today? Show off how pretty you both are." "Thomas McKenna," Sarah laughed. "You're shameless." "About my family?" "Absolutely." As they prepared for the trip to town, Hope bundled warmly, Sarah wearing the new dress Thomas had surprised her with, Thomas in his best shirt and jacket. Sarah caught sight of herself in the small mirror by the door. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the desperate, pregnant girl who'd been found by a way station months ago. This woman had color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, and the unmistakable glow of someone who was deeply loved. "Ready?" Thomas asked, settling Hope in the special carrier he'd crafted for her. "Ready," Sarah confirmed, taking his offered arm. As their wagon rolled toward town through the crisp winter air, Hope secure between them, Sarah reflected on the strange turns life could take. She'd lost everything: family, reputation, security, only to find something infinitely better in this quiet man who'd seen past her circumstances to her heart. "Thomas," she said as Cedar Falls came into view. "Yes. Thank you." "For what now?" "For declaring that I was yours. For meaning it. For making it true." Thomas stopped the wagon and turned to look at her, his brown eyes warm with love and promise. "Sarah McKenna, you've been mine since the moment I saw you fighting for your baby's life with nothing but determination and hope. And you always will be." When he kissed her there on the snowy road, with their daughter cooing contentedly between them and their whole life stretching out ahead, Sarah knew she'd found her home at last. In the distance, Cedar Falls waited with its mixture of friends and gossips, supporters and skeptics. But whatever reception awaited them, they'd face it together: Thomas, Sarah, and Hope McKenna, a family forged by choice and strengthened by love. The gentle cowboy had declared her his, and in doing so, had given her everything she'd never dared dream of: a name, a home, a future, and a love that would last all their days.